Good morning, good morning, good morning. Reading from the Word of God, we're going to read that this morning. Water from the rock, it's Exodus 17, 1 through 7. The whole Israel community set out for the desert of Sin, traveling from place to place as the Lord commanded, and they camped at Rephidim. Say that 3 times. But there was no water for the people to drink, and so they quarreled with Moses and said, "Give us water to drink." And Moses replied, "Why do you quarrel with me? Why do you put the Lord to test?" But the people were thirsty for water there, and they grumbled against Moses, and they said, "Why did you bring us up out of Egypt to make us and our children and livestock die of thirst?" And then Moses cried out to the Lord, "What am I to do with these people? They are almost ready to stone me." And the Lord answered Moses, "Go out in front of the people, take with you some of the elders of Israel, and take in your hand the staff which you struck the Nile, and go. I will stand there before you by the rock of Horeb. Strike the rock, and water will come out of it for the people to drink." And so Moses did this in the sight of the elders of Israel. And he called the place Massah and Meribah, because the Israelites quarreled, and because they tested the Lord, saying, "Is the Lord among us or not?" This morning I wanted to talk about this corona test. This idea, is the Lord among us or not? First, I want to tell you that we're going to start having. We're going to forego public services for the next couple weeks, that we see what's going to happen here with the coronavirus. And what we'll do is we'll be having services on Facebook. I'm expecting that we're just going to have this be a couple weeks, and then we'll be ready for Easter coming up. The Lord knows, and we've just got to be faithful with that. But I wanted to do kind of what I think is relative to what we are going through here currently. And I call this the corona test. Is the Lord among us or not? These words say so much about what we believe. And I have 3 words for you this morning, and they relate to this idea of toilet paper, hand sanitizer, masks, painter suits, gloves, stuff like that. I want to first say that I'm really ashamed of the condition of some people. I think what we've come to a point in our nation where people have become very selfish. And evidence of that is when you go to the store and the things that you need just to carry on normal business in your household, they're completely gone because people are hoarding these things because they're concerned about themselves. So the coronavirus gets really bad. What am I going to do for the next few months if it gets really bad? And they don't think about anybody else. And this whole idea of self-quarantining is kind of ridiculous to me, because if we can't have people be considerate of others when it comes to items like toilet paper, how do we expect them to self-quarantine? It's almost an oxymoron. It's like you expect good for them in one area, but you don't expect good from them in other areas. And as I said, so hoarding is selfish. And it makes me think about the kind of world that we live in. Why are people so selfish right now? And I believe it's because they don't know God. Because I would like to believe that most Christians would go, well, you know what, I don't need 4,000 rolls of toilet paper, and so therefore I'm going to get what I need, but I'm not going to stock up to the point where I'm going to be able to hide from the world for 6 months. I don't think that that's appropriate. And there are people, I've run into some people that are concerned for elderly people that can't make it to the store, and they can't even get them a roll of toilet paper. I'm disgusted by that. I'm disgusted by the fact that we are so selfish that we would want to sell rolls of toilet paper for $1 a roll or $5 a roll just to try to take advantage of a situation that is potentially hazardous to us all. In the story today that I read about, the Israelites come to Moses because they have no water to drink. Now, There were many times when the Israelites grumbled against God. When they went to Moses and said, God's not doing this, God's not doing that, God's not meeting our needs. And yet God delivered them from Egypt, from slavery, from bondage. And they trusted God to bring them safe thus far, but they continued to sin. And which was culminated in them making the golden calf when Moses went up Mount Sinai to bring back the Ten Commandments. But as you see, as they travel through the desert, they have a tendency to do a lot of bad things. They say to Moses, "Give us water to drink." And they're so demanding. They're really angry. And they're lashing out at Moses. And Moses says, "I'm afraid that people are going to stone me. I'm afraid that there's going to be this riot." And I thought, when I was reading this, I thought, man, this is kind of like where we're at today. This is the condition of our world right now. That people are angry and panicking and they're fighting. And I was going, well, how does this happen to a people that are supposed to be united? We're United States, right? How does this happen in a place where we're known to be united? When we're known in the world to be humanitarians? When we're known in the world to be people that go in and fight against evil? We send our armies and our military, should I say, everything, including the Navy and the Air Force and all. We send them to places and we war against this notion of oppression. We fight against those people that want to hold and oppress people and keep them from having freedom. We fight against terrorism. Yet, in a situation where we need to be united, we're divided. And we live amongst people that are so selfish that they're only caring about themselves. Now, I thought this morning before we came to church, we had people that were going to come to church, and I was laying there in my bed just before I got up and took my shower, and I was wondering, what should we do? What can we do in light of the coronavirus? How can we show that we're not selfish? Because to me, really, the bottom line could be the budget. We could go, I need to have people here. We need to pay our bills. We need to have this building continue to function so that we can carry out this ministry. And then I thought, well, you know what? After talking with my wife, I thought, this is really selfish. What the right thing to do is to say, well, what is the greatest concern here? That even the smallest member of our church, even the weakest member of our church, would not be affected by us gathering. And so therefore we decided to forego public services for a while so that we can see where the coronavirus is going and how this is going to work out. No one knows how it's going to work out. This is a new virus. Maybe a strain of a familiar virus, but it is a new virus entirely. And so what is it going to be like? What's it going to look like? What's it going to look like in 6 months? What's it going to look like in 2 weeks? Are we going to get to see numbers go up, or is it going to level off? And the key is to see it level off. So what do? Well, the Oregon Health Authority has these guidelines. And the governor imposed some restrictions on gatherings 250 people or more. Well, what good does that do? Because then you have 250 people that could be infected or share the virus. And you send 250 people out in the world, and that's even creates more of a problem. So in order not to be selfish, in order not to think about us primarily, we decided to forego our services for a period of time so that we could protect those that were the weakest or the most vulnerable within our church body. As I was thinking about this, I thought about the condition of our nation and how we've gone south, how we've gone so far one direction. And this brought up this idea of Satan's plan to destroy our country, to destroy our world, to destroy our peace. We as believers believe in the Prince of Peace, the one that brings peace in the most difficult situations. And I can only look back here, just recent history, and mark these things for you, that the devil has been creating this political division within our country, to the point where it's almost like at the verge of a civil war. We have these two factions, this left side and this right side, and the two do not meet in the middle. And then right in the middle of all this conflict, there comes this virus. And this virus doesn't unite us, it divides us. It doesn't bring us closer together, it separates us. Noted by the fact that people are hoarding items that we need for our daily care. To me, what this does is there are a lot of things to be learned by the coronavirus. Not only how our infrastructure works and how those people that are in politics, how they send care to the federal government, and how the states are helped, and how the local communities help. There's lessons there, but there's also lessons about what people look like and how they interact in times of great trouble or concern or fear. I think it's shameful to think that the devil would be able to tear us apart based upon the fear of a virus taking us out. I think it's terrible that people would not be concerned with the children in this world or in this community, or to be concerned with the children, the elderly within our community. That they would just hoard these things so that they can meet their needs. Moses said, "Why do you quarrel with me?" As if Moses had some control over what God was doing and what was happening with the circumstance that they were in. And it reminds me of this quarreling that we see from an example of those people that are set in Washington, D.C. to lead our country. And the quarreling and division instead of the unity. And then Moses says, "Why do you put the Lord to test?" This is really a similar time. And I think this is a corona test. This is a test of who we are as people. I can go back in history just a short time ago, and it seems for people that are born in the later part of this century, or the earlier part of the century, because we're in a new century now, but those younger people don't remember this time in this country where people were more united. Slowly but surely we're becoming more divided. But I'll remind you of, or I'll tell you about the history of World War II. The history of World War II is such that we had this common enemy, this fascism that was breaking loose in the world. This idea that certain people would dictate what the body of other people within that government would do. It was rampant in Japan, because Japan had an emperor, and the emperor was like God to the Japanese people. Germany had a leader who was a fascist, who believed in killing other people, in euthanizing them. Not euthanizing them, but what do they call it when you do a killing of people, or by race? Genocide. And so Hitler believed in genocide, and he believed in killing people because they were not the pure race. So we have these enemies in the world, and even the Soviet Union was our ally against Germany, because Germany had attacked them also. And in the world, we didn't have, at this time in the world, we didn't have the ability to conduct ourselves economically, because we were at war with so many countries within this world. And so we were on our own. We had steel drives, we had rubber drives. We had people that were rationing and people that were rationed. Now, there were people that took advantage of the rationing, but it was considered un-American to do so. It was considered wrong. Because everybody was united against this idea that we were having this battle against the fascism that was trying to break out in the world. Against the genocide that was taking place under Hitler's regime. And so what happened was people became united. Little kids would drag wagons through the streets and get metal and get rubber. They would have community drives and community watches where people would look for planes. They would have blackout curtains. Everybody was trying to fight the war on their own ground as a united front against something that was attacking us at large. And yet, we have all this history that goes by, and then we forget what it's like to be united. And the devil comes in and starts to divide us. And people start yelling at each other, and they start taking each other to task, and they start having problems. And then we're kind of waylaid by this virus that we don't know what it looks like, but we can look at the world and see what it's doing. And it seems pretty important that we become united. People want to argue about whether it's a big concern or not a big concern. It doesn't really matter whether it's a big concern. It's a concern. It doesn't matter whether or not you take care of just yourself. It matters whether we get through this together. And how we can make it so that as a community of people, we don't have to go and say, let's just forget about it, let's all embrace each other and share the virus, because that would be wrong. But being responsible enough that you have the concerns for other people. As a contractor, I have a lead license, so that when I can work on houses that are below 1975. And so there's certain gear in order to go in and do lead, take the lead out, or to turn around and test for lead. There's certain protections that I need. And I went online to this place that I buy stuff from, and they supply contractors and corporations and big businesses with materials. And I went on there to try to buy just the basics that I need, like the gear to protect yourself, the gloves, and a mask. I didn't want 20 masks, I just wanted one mask. I couldn't buy anything. You know why I couldn't buy anything? Because everybody had hoarded everything to the point that they had no market. I mean, they had no market. They had no way of obtaining those things. So there was no marketability. There was nothing that they could market. There was nothing they could sell to me. Because people had hoarded it to the point that it didn't exist. And I thought, well, why have people become so selfish that it would affect me to be able to conduct my business and be able to make money to help support my family because somebody's worried only about themselves and what the coronavirus might do to them, that they're buying up every single product that has any kind of protection. I think it's ridiculous. And then it led me to another thought. I thought to myself, how have we become so independent, not independent, but so dependent upon a country such as China, that when we run out of something that we can't produce it within our own country? How is that united? How is that protecting our own interest? And you go, well, that's not part of the world market. No, I think really what the problem is it wasn't about the world market that created this problem for us. It's our selfishness. Because what we want to do is we want to get that television set for $299 instead of paying $700 for it, made in the United States. We have become a nation of selfish people. A nation that is only concerned with itself. When we look at the story this morning, we see these people just ready to stone Moses. And what does Moses do? He cries out to God. He says, God, help me. The people are ready to stone me. And God says something really interesting to Moses. He says, go out in front of the people. Now, I don't know about you. I don't know how many people I would want to go out in front of that would want to stone me. And maybe people want to stone me for this message this morning because I've said some things that are kind of tough. But he says, go out in front of the people. And to do that, when God says that, it demands faith, courage, and trust. See, what the people lacked at that very moment was faith and courage and trust in God. And he says, Moses, I'm going to trust you with that. I'm going to trust you that you'll have the faith and the courage and the trust to believe that I can do this. That I can take care of this. So he goes out in front of the people and he takes the staff that he struck the Nile with and he strikes the rock because God tells him to strike the rock. And out of the rock gushes this water. Water flows from it and it gives the people what they need. I think God was saying, the people will drink this morning because I am God. This was a testing. This was a testing of whether or not the people would trust God once more or they would rebel. In Israel, they spent 40 years in the desert because they continued to rebel against God. I'm reminded that we are a godly nation. That this nation was created through faith in Jesus Christ. If you look at our Constitution, it's there, it's written. Our Declaration of Independence, it's there, it's written. We are endowed by our Creator, by God. And yet, we've come so far, and yet we've gotten so far away from the truth of that. Jesus is the living water, and I found this picture this morning, or not this morning, but last night. Jesus is the living water. He's the living water. I think of the woman at the well, the Samaritan woman. See, the Samaritans had this they were partially Jewish, but they weren't fully Jewish. And so the Jews, because of the cleanliness laws and because of the genealogy that they had, they did not really consider the Samaritans to be true Jews. And so when Jesus comes up to the Samaritan woman at the well, he starts to talk to her, and the first thing that comes out of her mouth, and she says, why would a Jew, have anything to do with me, a Samaritan? And Jesus says, if you would have known who it is, and I'm paraphrasing, of course, and I'm jumping around a little bit, but I'm trying to get to the crux of the story. I'm trying to get to the meat of what I'm saying. If you would have known who it was that asked you for water, you would have asked him, and he would have given you living water. Jesus is that living water. Jesus is an illustration of that rock being struck and water coming out of it, giving life. And we, as people, as Christians in this world, we need to remember that that rock was struck for us. That He provided the water, Jesus provided the water for us all to drink. He is the living water. People need to stop grumbling and fighting and backbiting, arguing about whether or not it's a big deal or not a big deal, or it's going to kill us many people or not kill us many people, whether we should be concerned or not be concerned. What they should be doing is they say, we have a crisis. Whether it's manifested in the news, where it's manifested by the world numbers, whether it's manifested by the lack of knowledge, we have a crisis. And who we are as people is determined by how we act in the midst of a crisis. Do we put our faith on that living water or in that living water? Or do we grumble and complain and say, give us water, we demand water now? And that we're ready to stone people and argue with them and fight with them and grumble and tear them apart because we don't know? Are we willing to stand and say, you know what, I believe in this living water. I'm going to be prudent, but I'm going to be faithful. I'm going to be careful, but I'm going to care for others. I'm going to protect my family, but I'm also going to look out the interest of others. And I'm not going to hoard. I'm not going to be selfish, because we need to get through this all together. If this becomes a crisis that is the big crisis that's supposed to happen, then it will destroy our economy. It will destroy people. And people will attack each other. And if this is the condition of our world, I pray that Jesus would return. Because I do not want to see a world like that. I don't want to live in a world where people are full of hate. And they have no compassion for each other. And they fight with each other. And they only protect their own interests and do not care about the interest of others. I don't want to live in a world where people are ready to stone other people because they don't hear what they want to hear, or they don't get what they want to get. Or they're so frantically in fear that they're willing to do anything to survive. I believe with my whole heart, if tomorrow I got the coronavirus and it took my life, I know I would be with my Savior. I cannot control a virus. We cannot politically control a virus. We cannot control a virus by nature of our hoarding and our selfishness. We cannot control a virus with our sin. So in these trying times, in these times when there's chaos and fear, what kind of people are we going to be? Are we going to be people that are afraid of that? We're going to be people that are so afraid of that we're willing to hurt others? Are we going to grumble and complain and say, give us water, give us this, give us that? No, it's not that way. It should be this way. Are we going to be people that say, I trust in the rock? The rock. And then when that rock is struck, that out of it's going to flow water, and that water is from my Lord. I'm going to be strong and united with the people within my country. A united states. An ideology that says that we're in this together. That says that we're fighting the same battle. We don't have to be concerned about the enemy and how the enemy fights the battle. We have to be concerned about how the enemy divides us. See, because all that other stuff and how the enemy fights the battle, those are simple things. But if we are divided over something like this, and it ends up being small, what does it say about who we are? And what happens if something even worse happens within this nation? Are we going to be eating our children? That happened in the history of Israel. Are we going to be turning against our brother, our neighbor? Greater love hath no man than he would give his life for his neighbor. Are we going to be friends? Are we going to be enemies? Are we going to be selfish? Are we going to be caring for others? The devil wants us to devour each other. The devil wants us to attack each other. The devil wants us to destroy each other. Because you know what? When that happens, it makes life a lot easier for him. We need to believe. We are a nation that was created by faith. And some of us have become selfish, greedy, and self-serving. We are a strong people, a united people, a people that cannot be divided and that should not be divided, a people that can stand together and fight through anything. We've proven it through our history. Jesus this morning sits at the well of your heart, bidding you to drink the living water that brings hope and faith, a living water that denies and rejects the selfish nature and seeks the safety and help and love of others. This morning I am reminded of this passage, those final words. And I really want to send them home this morning as we close. Is the Lord among us or not? Do you believe that the Lord is among us or not? If you don't believe that the Lord is among us, then I guess you will fight for every last bit, every morsel. You'll fight to the death. You'll destroy your neighbor. And your humanity will not be evident. But if you believe the Lord is among us, then this should echo across this nation and prove men and women's hearts. If the Lord is among us, what kind of people should we be? What kind of faith should we have? Regardless of the outcome, I pray that we can learn from this experience. I pray that we can learn what we are missing in response to our neighbors. I pray that we can learn what we're missing or what they are missing in their response to us. This morning I want to remind you of what we believe. And I had set up communion. I was going to have communion, but then I even thought of that. And I said, well, if we end our public services, but before we ended our public services for a short time or for, put them on hold, I was going to have communion. And I thought, well, maybe even communion would be a bad example. So as I close, I want to remind you of what communion represents. And there are no rules. There's nothing that says that you have to do it in a church to make it important. It's what's in your heart. See, the idea of communion is this representation of your faith in Jesus to take away all sin, to solve the problems in this world, to restore the broken nature of where we live in this earth, to restore or reconcile humankind to God. During the Passover, the disciples were gathered with Jesus in the upper room. And they were all reclining at the table, and Jesus reached out and took the bread. And he broke it. And he says, this bread represents my body that will be given for you. And then he passed it around, and they took that bread. I invite you to take some unleavened bread, or even you can even take real bread if you want to, because it's a representation. Unleavened would be perfect. Regular bread is okay, especially in these times when you don't want to travel out very much. Regular bread is okay because it's what it represents. And break that bread and think about what Jesus has done. And then the same way, he took the cup, which had wine in it. And you can do this with your family. You can take grape juice and you can share it with your children. And he took this wine and he says, this wine represents the blood that I will shed on Calvary for the forgiveness, for the remission of sin. That blood that kept the angel of death from entering those households that had the blood of the lamb sacrificed. When Israel got ready to leave Egypt, that night that the angel of death took the firstborn, the Jews were told to put the blood over the door frames so that the angel of death would see the blood and pass over. That's what Passover means. And Jesus instituted this new covenant with us by his blood. And he said, here's your new Passover. Here's this new gift that is given to you so that the angel of death will pass over. He says, took the wine, he says, this represents the blood of a new covenant. This represents the blood I will shed on Calvary. He says, as often as you gather in my name, drink this blood in remembrance of me. Drink this wine, drink this juice in remembrance of me. During this time of waiting to see whether or not this coronavirus is more severe than we think, or if we're just trying to narrow out that, level off that curve, the amount of people that get infected. It's important that we remember what Jesus did for us in Calvary. It's important for us to have communion, to remember that. You can have communion in your own home. It's important for us to remember that through that sacrifice on Calvary, that Jesus gave us new life. That Jesus gave us a reason to have hope. That Jesus gave us this hope that even though we might die in this world, that we would have life everlasting. I believe that there's nothing on this earth that can control a virus. That the only power that exists to control this virus right now, because we have nothing to cure it. We have no way to do anything but let it run its course. But I do believe that there is one thing that we can do. We can pray. We can have faith. We can trust God. And we can pray for others. And we can pray for our nation, that it would unify us. And we can pray for each other, that if any one of us gets it, that it would be mild. And it wouldn't do any damage to the people that we love. I will be praying for you. And I ask that you pray for me and my family. Let's go to prayer right now. Heavenly Father, we thank you and praise you because we know that you are a God that provides water out of a rock. That's so amazing. I cannot strike a rock and get water. You're a God that provided a way for us to have salvation. And we could not save ourselves no matter how good we were. That sin was within us, inherently within us, within our DNA. That it was passed on from generation to generation from Adam. But yet you came down in the form of a man. And you gave us a way through his suffering, his sorrow, his pain, his death, and his resurrection. Lord, help us be people that remember that. Help us be people that do not buy into the panic, but are prudent, that are cautious, that are as gentle as doves, but are as wise as serpents. Let us be people that stand on the rock, trusting that that rock will provide water. Let us be people that drink from the well of life and share that well of life with others. Let us speak peace to other people's hearts when they feel despair. Let us pray for them in the midst of their trials. And let them help us show others that do not believe that selfishness is sin and that we are in this together. Lord, I thank you for this time. I pray that we would be ever mindful of your presence this week, and we'd be ever mindful of those people that need to hear the gospel, that need our care and need our help. I'm reminded this morning of Mother Teresa, who put herself right in amongst the lepers of India. She did not concern herself with her own safety. She was concerned with those that had a need. And during all that time, she never got leprosy. She never got ill. I believe that your provisions are pure, sure, and guaranteed. And I trust that you will help us develop that within ourselves, that we are not complacent, but we're faithful. I thank you for all that you do. I ask you bless us all. In Jesus' precious name, amen. Go in peace. God bless you.